Once upon a time, it was summertime in the country. The fields were golden, and the tall grass was gently waving in the blowing wind. Among the green reeds beside an old country farmhouse, a duck was sitting on her nest. She had grown weary from the long wait, but at last, her eggs began to crack, and out popped one duckling after another. The countryside was full of cheerful peeping. "Quack, quack," said the mother duck, and all the little ones came waddling after her. But the largest egg of all had not yet hatched. It was odd and mottled, and the mother duck feared it might be a turkey's egg. At last, with a crack and a snap, the big egg broke open, and out came a duckling, but oh, how different he was! He was large and gray, with down that stuck out awkwardly, and a long neck not like the others at all. "He is not like the rest," the mother duck said, puzzled. "But we shall see if he can swim." And he did swim better than any of the others. Still, from that day on, the duckling knew only sorrow. Wherever he turned, he was met with cruelty. The other ducklings pecked him, flapping their wings to drive him away from the food. The chickens in the yard jeered at him and called him names he did not understand, and even the cat curled his whiskers and called him ugly. His own brothers and sisters mocked his gray feathers for not being yellow like theirs. They made fun of his strange neck, and the way he awkwardly waddled behind them with his legs that were too long. They laughed amongst themselves. "You're not one of us," they quacked and turned their backs to him. The mother duck, though not cruel, could not hide her disappointment. "If only he were more like the others," she sighed. "Perhaps then they would not be so hard on him." She tried to defend him, but even she grew tired, and in time she too began to ignore him. Day after day, the poor duckling was pushed and bullied. He ran away at last and wandered through marshes and woods, cold and hungry, hiding from those who would hurt him. Over fields he wandered, and through tangled hedges. He came upon a wide moor where the wild ducks lived, but they too turned him away. "You are too ugly," they told him. "Go elsewhere." Then the seasons changed. The duckling, now grown, saw his reflection in a pond. He was radiant white duck now, with white feathers and white wings. He was not a duck at all, but a swan. Other swans came gliding toward him. They bowed their heads, welcoming him as one of their own. The ugly duckling wept for joy. He had suffered much, but he had become something more splendid than he had ever dreamed. Yet, in his heart, a memory still lingered. He did not wish for vengeance, but he longed for understanding. And so, with his great wings and graceful form, he returned to the farm where his story had begun. The duck siblings were now grown ducks, still waddling about the same shallow pond where they had first mocked him, preening their feathers and quarreling over grains and minnows. They had long forgotten their strange gray brother, that awkward creature that would follow behind them. They looked up in astonishment at the glorious swan descending before them. A swan, more graceful than any they had seen, glided down from the sky with wings spread wide, his feathers white as clouds. The duck siblings blinked in awe of its beauty, for he seemed not of their world at all. But as he landed and came near, the truth came to them. It was he, the strange one, the one they had mocked and beaten and shunned. That gray, stumbling figure who had once huddled alone at the edge of the barnyard, too ugly for their company, too different to be loved. Now, standing before them, he was transformed. And then, without violence or malice, he stretched his duck belly bigger and bigger until his body casted a shadow over every one of the ducks. They shrank beneath his giant belly. Then, with a solemnity that chilled the blood, the swan began to open his beak wider enough to hold the sorrow of all the years he had suffered, and with a swift motion, he swallowed each of them whole, one after another, until every one of them were inside his big swan belly. The first duck was his boldest brother. He had once led the others in laughter at the strange gray chick. He now looked so small. The swan lifted the duck into his mouth in one giant bite, and then he was gone. The second duck would laugh at everyone else insulting the duck. He turned to run, but the swan caught him. He too was taken in one giant bite, and the second was gone. The third duck had not been cruel by nature, but had laughed to be accepted by the other ducks. He had spoken mean words out of fear of being mocked himself. This one bowed his head with no resistance or haste. And so the swan swallowed him too, in one giant bite. And now the third was gone. And so it continued one by one. Inside the swan's big belly, the ducks lay quiet and afraid. It was not hunger nor hate that the beautiful swan had. The swan wanted his brothers to feel his pain. All the pain that his brothers have caused him have turned him into this big beautiful swan that they now admire. There, in the belly, came the realization of shame. One by one, each duck began to feel the pain of this beautiful swan they were inside of. The cruel laughter they had once cast, the cold shoulders, the pecking, the jeering. They remembered the weird eyes of the strange duckling, and how they had turned away from their fellow brother. They saw what they had done. When the swan heard this, he gave a low, gentle quack to his duck siblings. And then, with care and tenderness, he opened his beak once more. Upon the shore he set them down, one by one. Just then, the old mother duck came waddling through the grass, noticing the strange quietness of the pond. She stopped when she saw the swan, for she knew him at once. No disguise of beauty could hide the child she had once doubted. She bowed her head low, and the swan, now tall and splendid, gave a soft nod. From that day forward, the ducks no longer waddled in ignorance. They swam at his side and listened when he spoke. They watched the sky when he flew, and though they could not follow him into the clouds, they knew something great had been near them. And the swan, once scorned as ugly, lived not with pride but with quiet gladness, for he had turned sorrow into grace, and cruelty into understanding. And so, in the pond beneath the reeds, there was no more mocking, no more laughter at those who were different, but only warmth, and the memory of what had been, and what had been forgiven. The end.